Hi, Jesse. We're going to take a look at your rhythm and repetition project, as well as your Notan posting. Offer a little observation here. So let's start off. Let's take a look at your rhythm and repetition first. It looks like you positioned the undulating on the top, and we went to progressive rhythm and alternating rhythm. It looks like you have the basic concepts of the rhythms down, being that the aggressive rhythm is a direction-based type of tool. Moves the eye in a particular way. It leads the eye. Usually we use leading lines to accentuate a progressive rhythm. Leading lines means like converging lines like this. And in your progressive rhythm here, this one, as well as this one, we're getting that in a very, very strong sort of way. This one as well, this one as well. Whenever you find lines that move into the distance, it's called leading lines, and you can almost be certain that you can find a progressive rhythm within those. Now, you know, I think this one is sort of a one-note thing. There's not a whole lot going on photographically with it. I think something like this has a lot more potential because you've got things like shadows and you've got the horizon. You've got some things that might be playing off of the pattern, that kind of thing. I still think maybe a better time of day might be better suited for even this kind of image, so that you get maybe some shadows on the ground, or maybe some variation of highlights on the chain link here, that kind of thing. All of these things are really how to move forward. That's what we always sort of get at when we're looking at your photography. We're looking at ways in which we can take a step forward. You can tell this is either earlier or later in the day because of the softness of the light, the way that it kind of the shadows are sort of diffused quite a bit. You can see how the edges of this shadow are very, very soft. You've used the phi grid here. You've also taken the horizon of the fence here and lined it up directly with the horizon. That's very, very interesting because you're almost flattening the space. So you've got this sort of contradiction happening because you're telling us that there's depth, but then you trick us by putting the top of the fence right at the horizon, which visually flattens the space, sort of gives us this kind of strange optical illusion. It's kind of interesting there. Now, we identified this one as undulating, and so I'm going to take a look here to see what we are seeing here as possibly the undulating rhythm. I'm getting the idea that this is moving around. This is more like an alternating rhythm that I'm seeing here, going around in the circle. You do have these rocks that are happening, which is a dissonant rhythm that's happening. Dissonant rhythm, which isn't what we were working with, but a dissonant rhythm is a repeating motif or element, that kind of thing, that has a sort of randomness to it, that there's no repetition that we can, or there's no pattern that we can find in the repetition. So I'm not certain that we hit it on that one with the undulating. This is a much better example of the undulating rhythm. All right. Let's back out of here. My mouse is going crazy. Yeah, it looks like what you are finding here is more of a dissonant rhythm than the undulating rhythm. This is dissonant rhythm. Dissonance is where you have a defined motif here in terms of it's a rock. The motif doesn't have to be identical. It can be a variety of things. It could be a chair, a bunch of different types of chairs. But in this case, what defines this as being a dissonant rhythm is that we have that archetypical type, the rock. It repeats, but the repetition has very little pattern to it. We can't really identify any particular pattern to how it's repeating, and that means dissonance. Undulating would have a pattern, but it wouldn't have necessarily a recognizable motif that we could pull on. So it would be like waves or folds and things like that, but it's hard. We wouldn't be able to really identify an object to connect it to. So yeah, Anjali, it looks like you're pinpointing more toward the dissonant rhythm than the undulating on here. That says nothing about the quality of your work. The quality of your photographs is quite beautiful. Especially, I came back to this one. Especially this is fantastic kind of photographic work. Here, you're just getting started. Looks like maybe one of your early images where you're like, okay, let me find out what alternating rhythm is, and boom. This is like one of those examples that you'll find. You type in alternating rhythm photography, you'll get something like this. Straightforward, you're identifying it. 1 + 1 = 2 kind of solution here. Now we're getting into something that may be a little bit more interesting, complex. We have the possibility of light creeping in here, making it a little bit more illuminated. We do have a little this is a little off, in terms of the angle. That might have been improved, but you're getting a lot better here with the possibilities. Again, you're identifying this, which is really all we wanted, but how much is this space participating in the photograph? Do we really need it? The other thing is about text in a photograph. Text is a difficult one because it's going to draw our attention to it right away. And unless you really mean for us to get stuck on text, you want to kind of be careful about having it in there. Otherwise, my eyes went right to Jeep, not only because it's a word, but because it's a point of high contrast as well. The silvery color next to the red, but you got the alternating rhythm down fairly well. And this is a little bit more of a subtle alternating rhythm. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, going back like this. You're also setting up a little bit of a progressive rhythm with these poles. It's not quite established because you don't have 3. You kind of need 3 of a thing to make it feel like a pattern. But you're getting the leading lines, which are suggesting the progressive rhythm. Now here, you're seeing one of the sort of benefits to a alternating rhythm, although I think we could have done more with this in terms of just arranging where that pole is. But when you have vast emptiness, when you have a lot of open space, incorporating alternating rhythm into it is a way to add structure where there's very little structure or very little subject to work with. Finding rhythm in those situations really allow for an energy to come about, even the most sparse of places, even the most uninteresting. It also works the opposite way. If you are in a really busy place, cluttered, and a lot of activity, it's real chaotic, finding a alternating rhythm or even a progressive rhythm can add a structure and add a direction to things where otherwise it might just look like a random scattered picture. It now turns into this photograph that leads your eye around, kind of gives them a pathway through all of that noise. So let's move on to your Notan photos, which is where we wanted to there we are. We wanted to work toward shadows, incorporating the cast shadow into our composition, as well as spaces in between. Now, I discussed what each of those is in the overview video. And so this talk is more about the aesthetics of your photograph, whether it's an effective use and so on and so forth. Also, some things that may not have come up in the discussions. You're getting the idea here. I mean, this is a very simple, very minimal way to go about this. There's no reason you can't explore this kind of photography. It's just a matter of the sort of what for that you'll need to kind of come to terms with if you're going to be reducing artwork and presenting it in this kind of way. certainly precedence for this. Minimalist art is a long history of that. And so if your intent is to sort of explore that that form, by all means, jump into it. It's a very difficult form because of the reduction. Everything you do matters. Absolutely everything you do. Light, tone, color, pattern, all of that stuff really is all you have after that. Here, you're taking a little bit more advantage of what we usually see as the shadows are incorporated into a photograph. Let's just kind of talk about this one just for a bit, because what you have here are several different planes going on, several different layers that are happening. You've got this ground, right? It's covered with the sort of cracked earth, a beautiful sort of texture going on there. And then you've got objects on there like rocks and sticks and other kinds of things that are laying on top of that. And then you have this shadow kind of entering into the space that is being cast, obviously, from something that is not seen. So it's this other thing that's kind of coming in there. So we have basically 3 layers happening in this very, very minimalist photograph. So what you're doing is you're taking advantage of light. You're taking advantage of the way light works to give complexity to what otherwise might be something simple without adding things. Right? You're adding complexity without adding subject. You're actually adding meaning. That's what ends up happening. And because you chose to allow this shape from the twigs to go off of the picture plane here, let them run off the page, they're starting to become shape rather than image of a twig. So it was a very good choice to allow these to sort of break the plane like this. Because it's taking them to the next point where it gets to be shape. This almost is a shape-based photograph that you're making here, whether you know it or not. Now, here is a bit more of what we would expect when we say, oh, we want cast shadow photographs. This is a little bit more of what we usually think about. At the same time, I want you to just take note of how dramatic the depth of field, or the shallow depth of field, makes this image look. I think you could probably play around a little bit with what you did back on that fence, where you kind of used these match-up lines and things to kind of do a kind of more of a optical sort of exercise, where this meets the peak, or maybe it kind of blends in with one of these and pulls it down. If we had lost this, meaning just kind of cropped it in right here, where this shape would have been closed in, meaning it would have been boxed in right here by the edge of the image, and then this kind of would have been boxed in, I think it would have been a much improved image here. Here, again, you're using good pattern here. This is a lot of cast shadow happening, which is really interesting. You got the progressive rhythm added to it, really kind of cool. Maybe if we had this a little bit more carefully positioned, this horizon back here, but I think this is a really kind of effective way to make something, again, out of nothing. You're trying to give a movement and direction out of things that aren't there. And you're using light in order to do it. So I think that's really, really kind of interesting. So spaces in between, by now, if you've listened to the overview video, you've heard me talking about it here and there, is really about giving equal attention to the space that is left over when you have an object. So, these spaces here, these spaces here, and these spaces here. There's a big difference between having something like this, which is a good example of what we're trying to do, and something where it's stacked up and you just have a bush kind of out in the middle of nowhere with lots of space around it. It doesn't mean you can't make images like that, where you have this sort of isolated, lonely kind of feel. But that's not what we were attempting to do here. We were attempting to activate the space and create movement. So it's all really comes down to your intention, what you're aiming at, what is it that you are moving toward, and then using the tools and the methodologies and the principles to get you there. So I think you're on the right track. Not all of the photographs are home runs, but I think that you're doing just what you need to be doing at the level that we're at. So I would take a look at those undulating images that you've identified. Take a look and see if you have other images. We can chat about clarifying those points a little bit more in the studio if you'd like. And we'll see you later on. I look forward to more of your imagery. All right, bye-bye now.